What is choiceless awareness? Really, it's about recognizing how awareness is the whole, and it is not arising within the body specifically. Right? Like how in a dream, awareness is everything. Awareness isn't arising within the dream character's mind. Awareness is the whole. We also assume that thinking arises within the brain, or the mind, or that thinking knows. But like how in a dream, thinking isn't arising from the dream character's mind. It is arising from the whole, the entire awareness of the dream. The dream character would just assume that thinking is arising from their brain, or that perception and seeing is arising from behind their eyes, right? But in a dream, you can recognize how awareness itself is responsible for everything. Perception, hearing, sensation, thought, all arises from awareness. For example, does a thought know of another thought? Does the thought dog know of the thought cat? No. Does a thought know of another conversation? No. It is awareness that knows of the thought dog or the thought cat. Awareness is what is aware of another conversation. A thought itself doesn't know a thing. And more importantly, there is no thinker. In that way, there is no thinker. Thoughts are arising, like how images arise on a TV screen and crash back into the TV screen. They are not separate from the TV screen itself. The TV screen, and this analogy being awareness. They are not two in any way. It is arising and crashing back into awareness. That's what a thought is. And awareness itself is the whole. Hence, there is no thinker. You just assume because you're an illusion of self that thinking and perception is coming from behind the eyes. Which then leads you to think, oh, I, the body, am the thinker. But is there even really anybody making a choice? Let's say I asked you a question like, which band would you prefer, Tool or Three Doors Down? Of course the answer is Tool, but let's recognize something. When I ask you, Tool or Three Doors Down, there's a pause, right? And then you think, Tool, and you give the answer, Tool. Prior to that thought, Tool, that knowing takes place, right? And what is in that pause before each thought? Awareness. So that knowing is arising from awareness. And then the thought arises, Tool, and you say, Tool. And then the next thought thinks, I chose Tool. And that's where this illusion of I am the thinker comes from. And in that you assume there's a chooser, right? But there really isn't one. That entire time, you awareness was the knowing. And it was already known before the thought, which you identify with, arises, right? So before what you think is you choosing it even happens, that knowing is there, is my point. There is no choice. And to go a step further, there comes a point where there is neither choice or no choice. There is neither free will or no free will. That's a concept of mind that does not apply to reality. Like how left and right, up and down, space and time, like some other videos talk about, do not apply to reality itself. They are concepts of mind. Great tools, but they do not apply to reality itself, that which you are. Awareness itself is untouched. It's dimensionless. And from that no-thingness, you get somethingness. So there's more to this, what is choiceless awareness, than just hearing me talk about it. You actually need to sit with yourself and recognize how you are awareness, and awareness itself is the whole. And there's not specifically anything within it. For example, the truck analogy. Is a tire on the truck the entire truck? No, right? It's just a byproduct. Is a door the entire truck? No, It's just a byproduct. Even when you take this combination of the byproducts and you put them together, you can't point specifically anywhere at the combination and say truck. You would be pointing at a byproduct. And to go a step further, the byproduct is just made of byproducts. And if we go to the core of that is the atom, which is 99% empty space, which we could just say is potential, just awareness, all possibility, selfless, either way. My point is, the truck itself is no thing. There isn't a truck specifically anywhere. So it's not a question of, did reality arise? Did awareness arise from nothingness? That's a misconception of nothingness. It is no thingness. Like how in the truck, there is no truck specifically anywhere. It is a no thingness. And from that no thingness, you have somethingness. This is also where the misconception of emptiness in Buddhism or non-dualism would come in for most people. They hear the word empty and it sounds negative. But really empty in this sense means just overflowing with possibility. Like how within the truck it is empty of a self, right? But in that you can create anything from that truck. Even after it's done, you can't use it anymore. You can take those parts and just keep creating. From that nothingness, you get somethingness. Looking at emptiness, look at it like this. Say we went back to if there was a time where there was just space, right? And there was no objects in it. If you ask space, what was it? Would it say empty? No, because there's no reference of itself to any other objects, right? It would say that it is whole. The term empty is a concept of mind that is in reference to objects. It's like if you were in a room and there were no people or chairs in it, right? You would consider that empty space in reference to there being people or chairs in the room, right? But in reality, that space itself is not empty in that way. It's just in reference to prior thinking the room was full. Because in a sense, the people, the chairs, all of it at the core is that no thingness as well. Just an emptiness, and not in the negative sense. A wholeness, if you will. But even the term wholeness is in reference to emptiness. So it's just a concept of mind. That's where this gets tricky. But the good news is, in reality, all you have to do is practice being present. Meditation oftentimes sounds like a weak word or something so simple that, why would I bother with it? But in meditation and being present, there comes a point when this conceptualization drops, and you are just a point of awareness. You are no longer a looking. And in that being awareness, you can have a legit recognition. And that is very significant. It's like how if I were pointing to the stars and asking you if you see the dolphin in the stars. The dolphin shape pattern. At first you may not see it, but then you recognize, oh, I see the dolphin. Nothing about the stars changed. It was just a recognition. Only in meditation, this recognition just isn't the significance of recognizing a dolphin. It's, the recognition of your true being, which is pretty significant. It can be exciting and very terrifying at the same time. Which is to say how significant that recognition is. I express it in this way because sometimes when I say recognition, it can seem simple and just blow it off. But this is a very significant recognition. And to have this recognition, you will yourself see how nothing is specifically empty, or there isn't nothing in that way. They're all just misconceptions of the term. And in that emptiness is really just this overflowing, continuous potential of possibility and creativity. So in a kind of Buddhistic or non-dualism sense, empty means overflowing. Nothing means no thing. And from that no thing, you can have somethingness, anything, really. And we only think of empty in the sense of being empty as in nothing in reference to objects. Remember that. It's just hard in the sense in meditation to become a point of awareness because you have this continuous pull outward to be a looking instead of a seeing. And there's a great difference between seeing and looking. And seeing, you're just a witness. You're not focused on any specific object. In looking, there's an attention outward, a tension outward. You are focused on a specific object. So also note that if you're in meditation and you're trying to have this recognition, you have to be a seeing. You cannot be looking for this. That is a tension outward. So in your meditation and being a seeing, you're going to have these thoughts to pull you away from the now, right? That's the ego, that feeling of lack, that feeling of fear that if I just sit here, I'm going to miss out. I have to go do something to feel whole. That is the illusion of self, the ego. The feeling that I need to go outward and do that to feel whole. A tension outward. That's the significance in practicing just being present with yourself. Because that feeling of lack or fear, the two traits of ego, are going to arise, and in sitting in that, it's like sitting in your nakedness. If you had to be naked in a room full of people, at first that may be very shocking, even terrifying. But the longer you're in that room naked, the more you become comfortable in it. It's not so intense. You could look at the feeling of lack and fear in that same way, sitting with it naked. You don't have to literally be naked, but you know what I mean. Just be with it. In doing that, you can transcend, I don't want to say discard, but transcend the feelings of lack and fear. Because really it's no different from what's on the other side of that, which is just a wholeness, right? Then you are still present when you have an urge to go watch a movie, but it's not from a place of lack, right? It's from a place of wholeness, awareness. That energy is all the same one energy, life energy. It's just if you move in it from this illusion of self, it arises as a feeling of lack. It's the same energy, it just comes off as lack. It's like watching the weather change. If you sit with it, it will pass eventually. It can't be the same forever. You just have to trust in nature, like a child trusts walking. They see all these giants around them doing it, and they keep trying to walk. They fall, they hit their head, they fall, they get up. It's a continuous cycle. They have a kind of trust that someday they're going to walk. You have to sit with yourself in that present and trust that someday you are going to feel utterly whole just being there. That in itself is this choiceless awareness. It's not that you don't have a self, it's that you are awareness, and awareness is the whole. And to say there's a chooser, a self, or even no self is a concept of mind, because indeed there comes a point when there is neither self or no self. I'm going to repeat that. There comes a point when there is neither self or no self. Oftentimes we debate that subject, but we completely overlook, well, what about that final stage? Where you recognize that neither one of those exist in that way. There's no argument at all about it. You can't even argue about it. Any label to it would be mind, a concept. Which is also why there's a misconception in the saying, those who know nothing at all. That doesn't imply that you can't know. That doesn't imply that the counter to everything I just said is, well, you can't know. Those who know don't know it. That's not what that means. It means that you have to drop mind, that conceptualization, the thinking, what you think is knowing. And in dropping mind, this conceptualization of reality, you know. So you don't know it from an intellectual perspective, it's from a seeing. And in that seeing, there is no mind, there is no knowledge in that. It's a recognition. So you can know. It's just that the way you're going to know is by dropping what you think is knowledge, which is metaphorical for, let's say, the story of Adam and Eve in the Bible, when they bite from the fruit of knowledge and they kind of step out of the garden in that way and they're no longer innocent. That's just a metaphor in the sense of becoming a mind, a thinking outward. You step out of your innocence, just pure awareness, right? And you become a thinking. Hey, wait, there's me, there's you. Well, then what happens to us after this? And you start asking all these questions, and it's just a bunch of conceptualization. And it confuses you. You can do much with mind. That's a great tool. That's why in most of these spiritual outlets, they tell you to kind of manage mind in a sense. Not ego, but mind. Those are two different things, to make very clear. And I'll make another video on that, but to just manage this knowledge. Because if you let that take over, if you let this thinking, this conceptualization take over, you're just getting further and further away from your innocence in the garden, from stepping back into the garden. So choiceless awareness isn't just about necessarily hearing someone speak on it and kind of grasping it. You're going to have to sit with yourself and have these recognitions of how you are awareness, and awareness is the whole. And there's not specifically anything in any object. And as you go down that route, you're going to recognize how there's not necessarily a chooser in awareness. There can't be. If awareness is the whole, there's nothing separate from itself to be choosing against. That's why when someone asks you a question 2 or 3 doors down, the question's asked, the question's over, there's a pause, you have the knowing, and then the thought arises. It comes from awareness itself. You have no choice whatsoever in that. And then in recognizing that you yourself are awareness, and that is the whole, just the concept of there being a chooser or not doesn't exist in that way. It doesn't apply. I don't want to say it doesn't exist. It doesn't apply to reality. So to understand choiceless awareness is just to understand yourself and what you are. And in understanding that you are awareness and that is the whole, you understand, you can have this deep moment, like another kind of just recognition how, oh, I am deathless. I am eternal in that way. Good night.